Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 601. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today, I have my favorite co-host, Corey Romero. Today is Wednesday, April 20th, 2022. Corey, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Eric. Doing well. Things in Utah are great. Weather's beautiful. How are things in California? How are you? And how is the color of the bay?
Well, let me tell you, it had gotten pretty cold here. We called it winter last week, but the sun is out in California now. It's warming things up. My bees swarmed, so the spring flowers are out. The California state flower is the poppy, and they're all in bloom. So we got a lot of prettiness out here in California. Can't complain. And the color of the bay, it is just a nice calm green because it's not very warm, but it is chilly. It's still a little bit colder on the cooler side, and so enjoying this kind of fresh late spring air as we go. On the show today, we're going to be talking cybersecurity with Rick McElroy. He's a principal cybersecurity strategist at VMware, works on the Carbon Black, came over, I think, from Carbon Black. We'll talk to Rick in a moment here. Before we get to Rick and cybersecurity, let's talk a little bit about what's happening. So obviously, on the last show last week, we talked about VMware Explore, a lot of chit chat about Explore. But I'll just say Explore is happening August 29th through the September 1st. It's going to be 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I believe we're having a Monday event that will be focused on DevOps. So you can look for that as well. Mark your calendars, US, August 29th in San Francisco. Go get your hotels. If you're going to come, we're going to have V Brown Bag there. We're going to have community booth, V Expert booth, all that stuff. We've talked about that. And at the same time, Europe is going to be November 7th through the 10th, 2022. Excited about being there and doing everything there as well. So with that news, Corey, anything else we need to talk about re-experts? Are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. I'll have some really cool, interesting news come up about the experts in the next couple of weeks. And when that happens, everybody will be first to know here on the podcast.
I know that I talked to our new CMO, got to have a chat with her, Laura Heisman. Really like her a lot. You know, I didn't talk much about our last CMO because she didn't really spend any time in community and never reached out and wanted to talk to us about community and be experts, all that. But I got on a call with her. She's really high energy. She loves social. She loves community. She wanted to know all about community, want to know all about vExperts, want to see the vExpert directory, wants to be a vExpert, wants to get on Hootsuite and TalkWalker. So going to be a lot of fun with our new CMO. I like her a lot. Her name is Laura Heisman. And since she seems to be excited about advocates and vExperts, I think we'll have her on, just bring her on. We don't usually bring higher ups because, we like to just kill them. But anyway, I'm only kidding. We will bring Laura Heisman on the show because I think she's going to be a great person to have as a CMO when it comes to community and social. So with that, let's get to our guest. He is famous in his own right in community because he runs the Howler. I think there's the Howler, Ask the Howler podcast series, live stream series on the Carbon Black channel on YouTube. So Rick, if you want to unmute yourself, I'll say hello to you. And why don't we start with welcome to the show and tell us a little bit about who you are. We are a community podcast, so we like to get to know everybody. Who you are, how long have you been with Carbon Black VMware, and what's your career arc look like?
Yeah, Rick McElroy, Principal Cybersecurity Strategist. Super happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm always excited to get out in the community. It's sort of where I work. I think people know me as being very active in the community, so I'm always happy to do these types of activities. But yeah, I've been here going on 7 years, so I massively predate becoming a public company, becoming acquired by VMware, all the way back to the days before we actually had a cloud product, when we were strictly an on-prem, EDR and application control company, and it's been a blessing. I'm extremely grateful to find myself in this role. It's been literally my funnest job that I've ever had. And previous life to this, how did I end up coming to work at a vendor when I've never spent any time at a vendor? Look, I started off on the offensive side of the house when I got out of the Marine Corps, and spent a number of years doing that against the Department of the Navy, against the United States Marine Corps, and I figured out that, frankly speaking, offense was way too easy. We got in every single time, every single engagement, and defense was lagging, and so I really wanted to go work on the defensive side of the house. So I started building and leading security programs out here in San Diego. Did that for a number of entities, and that journey and the journey of actually defending environments from within led me to actually meeting the co-founders of the company and then convincing them that I should come do this job for
Oh, that's interesting. A couple thoughts there. I did spend time in San Diego at the submarine bases.
Yes.
There's a lot of marine Navy there, submarine there. Been on base there. Great place, great city, and it is like the industrial complex for the U.S. military. San Diego is one of those places, right? Like it absolutely. So fond memories of my time down there. And then I got to ask you, like, when you joined Carbon Black, how many people do you remember, like how young they were, or how many people were at Carbon Black when you got started with them?
Yeah, I think we were about 250. So we had just pushed go on hiring, I think, some new sales folks, actually bringing in a new CMO, those types of things. So really, I think, moving beyond what we were doing. So very intimate. It's one of the things I guess I would say, if I had a regret over the pandemic or, things for me that changed, I'm used to having deep relationships with folks that I work with. Obviously, some of that is hampered with remote work and Zoom. But yeah, I miss being in the same room with people working on some really hard problems. And then obviously, I think being an advocate and a voice for our customers, and for security leaders out there to ensure that we're marketing our solutions correctly in a way that makes sense to people, and then B, are actually articulating the value that we can drive for them. And it's been great. I think it's been super well received by the community, along with the organization itself. It's sort of a true north that we have, really listening to our customers.
Right. And just so for the people that are listening on the podcast, if it's audio, Rick, your Twitter is InfoSecRick, right? So at InfoSecRick, go give him a follow, so that he can see you're out there. And thanks for coming on the podcast and be a part of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else career wise that we can hit you with, but I think that's a good sense of how you got here.
Well, look, the last thing I'll say is I don't believe any journey in cybersecurity is linear. So lots of times I'm speaking to folks that are just getting in their career, maybe folks that are mid-level of their career, and everyone's always worried, where do you stack rank? What are the things you have to do? Here's what I would tell you. Do good work and be associated with good people, and I think your career will take care of itself. But generally for me, I think finding interesting problems and interesting people that are working on those problems is a good way to really move your career forward, more so than like, here's the job you should go get, or the certification you should go get.
Yeah, I think as I wind down my career, because I think I turned 60 this year, and maybe I'll do another 5 or 7 years. Who knows? I'm excited about the work we do. I love the community, so like all that. But I gotta say, looking back, you're right. I did emphasize too much what I was doing, and not enough just the relationships you build and the quality of those relationships and the quality of what you do, because that for me stays with you. And at the end of your career, you look back, and I cringe at the things that I didn't do very well, but it paid a lot, right? And I'm most proud of the things I did do well, even and regardless of what it paid, right? So that is great advice, Rick. So thanks for that one. Let's get a little bit into, I know you do some Howler stuff, right? So maybe we can spend maybe 5 minutes or so just talking about what is Howlers. I've heard of Howlers. I know that I helped you guys do a couple live streams using the tools when Julia was out on vacation. So let's talk a little bit about Howlers and Carbon Black.
Yeah. So look, the Howlers, more than anything, are an idea, right? And so the idea behind the Howlers is really, to your earlier point, what you mentioned at the start of the podcast: community, community, community. Right? We are advocates on behalf of the cybersecurity community. We do that at multiple levels, whether that's Tom Kellerman and his work with the JCDC and the White House itself to really help set cybersecurity regulations and guidance out there that makes sense, whether that's engaging at a state and local level, or whether that's engaging with prospects and customers at something like an RSA or a Black Hat. We really act as trusted advisors again, both internally to the organization, so we hold that true north of the security operators, the security leaders that are really owning and operating our products. And then we really, really do care, and we're really passionate about security. And so we look for any of those opportunities to really help our existing customers mature what they're doing, or to help a prospect get in a better place, whether that's buying our technology or not. All that being, all that aside, the Howlers have a wealth. I mean, we've got Howlers who used to be CISOs for Bank of America and AT&T and the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, those types of experiences that we're able to bring to bear with our customers and the community in a way that gives them practical, actual advice they can mature their security operations and outcomes.
Right. So up level this a little bit, like the Howlers, for me, the way I understand it, there's a couple of you guys that come on the Howlers, Ask the Howlers show, but the Howlers is much like a vExpert organization that when we brought Carbon Black in, you have the Howlers, which are like kind of like vExperts for Carbon Black, right? And how many Howlers are out there?
Yeah, it's 25 plus of us, right? So there are full-time Howlers. So it would be correct to say myself, Tom Kellerman, and Karen Wurstel are paid to do this job. And then we have what I lovingly refer to as a bunch of awesome maniacs inside of our SBU that love security. That's that's who they are. That's what they do. And so we've really encouraged others in the organization to participate, and really participation at every level. So we have sales folks that are Howlers, we have SEs that are Howlers, we have people on our threat team that are Howlers. And so what we try to do as a group is provide this collective wisdom not only to each other, but also in the form of blogs, podcasts, webinars, all of that good stuff out to the community, so that we can keep them informed, and again, hopefully a little bit better than the shop next to them, so that these issues are a little less when they affect them.
It does remind me of VMware when we were a smaller company and we had vExperts, and I think we started with 25 vExperts along the journey, and then as we matured and grew in billions of dollars, we just ended up picking up more vExperts as we went along. So that's neat. I would encourage people to go to YouTube, look for Carbon Black, and you guys have the Howler Show playlist is on the Carbon Black YouTube channel, so you can go check out. Rick,
yeah, one final note on that, Eric, because I do got to plug it. So there's a reason we picked this name. We actually took inspiration from a book series that we are a huge fan of. So this book series is called Red Rising. You can go check it out. Think of it as Game of Thrones in our own solar system in the future. And there's a group in there called the Howlers. We took most of our inspiration from this particular group because of sort of their passion and fanaticism about what they were up to. And so we do want to plug the book and then tell everybody to go read it because it's amazing. And I'd love to talk to you about it because it's one of my favorite book series.
What is the book again? Say the title one more time.
Yeah, so the book series is called Red Rising.
Red Rising. Okay, cool. Yep. Good. All right. Check it out. I was going to say the Howlers was like barking dogs because, you're trying to bring light to people, or, maybe bulking wolves or whatever it is. That would have been my guess. And I meant to ask you that question, but you beat me to the punch. So there you go.
That's a fairly good take on it. And also one of the reasons that we thought it was a perfect name for the group.
Okay, so let's get on to security, right? Like we're here. I noticed that we talked last week about VMware Explorer, and SecOps is a big thing now. It's becoming like it's one of the major tracks, and it's the audience we're looking at bringing in. And to some degree, so the reason we have you here is that we are starting to, as IT practitioners, we are starting to get serious about SecOps. Let's talk about security overview, SecOps. What is it? And what do you know about it coming to VMware Explorer? You might not know much about that, but give us an overview of the security landscape and how it's becoming relevant to IT.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I'll actually, I used to have an email signature. So the first time I ever built a security program, I was trusted to do that, was actually for an organization called Mailboxes, etc. I was brought in prior to UPS buying them and rebranded everything to UPS Store. But, and you can go ask any of my IT admins that I worked with because I'm still friends with them. The email signature that I had said, good system administration is good security and vice versa. And I remember when I first put that in there, and I actually remember all of the comments that came back from the IT administration team because they thought it was a little funny, right? And I wasn't actually trying to be funny about it. I actually do believe in that principle. I do believe in the principle that smart people who are empowered and understand what they're working on are able to better detect anomalies. They're better able to patch it. They're better able to do the hardening. And none of those things, in my humble opinion, are a core function of what a security operations team should do, right? Those are IT functions, right? When you talk about secure technical implementation guidelines and what is a server, what does a SQL server need to look like to be secure, right? Like, hey, I can give you the guidance on that, but I'm not hands on the keyboard configuring the system. So now let's talk about security operations and building that, what that looks like from a modern perspective. Well, as you can imagine, it's a bit of a mess. So imagine you're a security team. You are probably at some point in your career operating with the least amount of information on what's actually occurring inside of this environment. So asset management becomes important. Like, what are the things that are connected to what? What do I need to defend? I can tell you, I've greenfield built 3 security programs, and in each one of those cases, it's been an inordinate amount of time. I mean, months to actually do internal reconnaissance to even figure out the boundaries of the network that's wrong, right? Now, we all know documentation is important from that perspective, but what do you do when an organization suddenly gets an influx of money and you're hiring, 100 people a month, you're adding, 10,000 cloud systems? Like, it's really hard to scale that, especially when you're sort of new. So security operations in a lot of ways is still catching up to where IT is. But if you look at it, it has touch points everywhere. There's compliance touch points. There's legal touch points from an investigation perspective. There's the visibility into actually being able to see what these attackers are doing, right? So that's going to be a blend of the network, your data. You've got some event logging going into that. You're probably backhauling it to a SIM, something like Splunk, something like Logarithm. Now you're seeing modern teams bring that into their own data lake to write their own analysis over it. Or what you see from a vendor perspective, which is this idea that if you can generate more data, you can actually see more of these behaviors, which means you should be able to prevent, detect, and respond to those. And so it's a huge challenge. And then of course you have the one issue that I love talking about with IT and security, which is how many times does security notice an anomaly? And I'm going to put this in air quotes. They kick it over to the IT team to get some sort of information. IT's running around, they kick it back to security. Meantime, we're wasting everybody's time over a false positive, right? So where I really like to operate on is how can we drive down these false positives? How can we start to give both of these teams a common data set to operate off of so that we can bring both of those teams to bear on the security operations problems? Because frankly speaking, you're never going to get enough people inside of security. You're never going to have enough time to do 100% of the job that you need. So I believe it's fundamentally critical to start to enlist some of these folks that are great administrators. They do care about their systems. They do understand what a bug looks like when it's introduced to the environment. Great. Now let's start to train them on what a security bug, what does an exploitation of a vulnerability on that system look like? Start to tap them for those purposes. And I think the teams that are doing that are having much better success than the ones that are still siloed.
Yeah, it is interesting. In my experience, maybe 15 years ago, nobody asked me, when they gave me big budget and I needed to hire another 100 people, they weren't asking, what am I doing with security? How am I making sure those 100 people we bring in, what's the operational process for, keeping everything organized and safe and secure? None of that. Maybe 7 years ago, we started encrypting things like, the hypervisor needed to be encrypted. The file systems it needs uses because we were kind of under attack, right? And so there was this notion that, we have to encrypt everything. That was kind of like and everybody looked at encryption from point to point, right? And that became security. And now I see security becoming a holistic, as you just point out, right? Like it's like process, it's systems, it's everything coming together, right? And making a whole security footprint. And we do now get, people saying, when we're doing a new program, how does security weave into that, right? It is becoming, if it's not, it's not a second cousin anymore, right? It's maybe my sibling, but maybe it's also my parent, right? Like I can't really tell where the level is, but it's certainly one of these things now that everybody starts to worry about. operationally. So when we talk security operations, right? Like, how have you seen the operations side of that? Like in the data center, are you getting more groups that are focused on security? We had network admin, we had storage admin, we had compute admin. Where does security fall into that space?
Yeah, all of the above, because again, verticals matter, size of the organization matters. Obviously, I think finance is doing a bit better because they can spend more money on the problem and hire some key talent. I think healthcare is still struggling, obviously for a lot of the known reasons. But yeah, I think holistically, as we're sitting down talking to folks, and it's been a real interesting, I think, discussion journey for us, right? So we, as a Carbon Black entity, we're used to having a voice with CISOs, right? So CISOs understood what we did, they understood the value that we had. CIOs, as you can imagine, probably had no idea who Carbon Black was, let's face it, unless we came in to do an investigation once they were breached. So now that we're talking to CIOs, it's interesting because we actually describe our value proposition slightly differently, right? Like when I talk to a CIO, I don't talk about the efficacy of our product from a look. We catch 100% of these particular APT actors, or here's our ransomware efficacy. No, it's here's how I can drive down the risk of this environment, and holistically, as a CIO, as somebody who's delivering a technological solution, you're delivering a platform. And in my head, I draw a key analogy to how we deliver motor vehicles and automotive, or how airlines build those airlines, right? Like they're not like when you build a car, you don't strap the brakes on at the end, right? You're not then retrofitting seat belts and adding in some fourth party to put in your rear view mirrors. Like that's not what happens. You deliver a whole platform with safety in mind, right? Because consumers care about that, and you can clearly follow the case of Volvo or anybody else out there who's creating a safer solution. People do care, consumers do care, and so I think as we're thinking about delivering that IT platform, we have to think of it the same way and go, well, wait a second, I need to bring detection and response into this platform. Like I need it to generate telemetry so I can understand abnormal. Awesome. Why don't we include that in the upfront requirements to actually build the thing, and then give our developers a way to do that increases their safety, right? So minimizes their chances of making mistakes, and maximizes their velocity. Those are the two things that I think the shops that are really thinking about this cloud first world are working on from a platform delivery. But it's baked in now. Like you can't just keep bolting things on afterwards. That's not what our customers are asking for.
Right, and that gets us into VMware acquiring Carbon Black. You're here, Carbon Black's here. We're expanding Explorer, I want to say VMworld, to include security operations. When we talk about Carbon Black's product, I know it's a SaaS product, right? I know it sits and you connect it. Why don't you take us through like where we are when it comes to Carbon Black integrating into our product family now, right? Like I know it's been a year or two. We got you a couple of years ago, and it was just all standalone. And we have been slowly integrating things into that because I think it is that integrated approach that you want to have. Where are we when it comes to integration, and how do you see this playing out? Take us through a little bit about how Carbon Black fits into the VMware portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think it all started where we wanted it to start, which is, can I push out our agents via any virtualized server that lives in a vSphere environment and just have that on? Well, the answer to that today is yes, it exists. You don't have to do a client push. It's part of the VMware toolkit, which I think fundamentally, like having seen the beta version of VMware when it first came out, like the actual beta version of Workstation out there, like to where we have this now, where you're actually getting instrumentation and telemetry from your vSphere server itself. Fantastic, right? But are we going to stop there? No. I am a huge fan of what we've done from a workload perspective. So again, I'm having that instant on visibility, the ability to not do, let's not roll out 10,000 more agents. It's like it's just a service that should run, right? Great. Now more interesting things that we're doing from a detection and response perspective. So if you think about detection and response holistically, and I think anybody in our organization or across the organization would fundamentally argue that we believe a bunch of people are looking at this problem incorrectly. They're attempting to extend one particular set of visibility into another area, i.e. maybe network and endpoint coming together. And we're certainly going to stop there, but I don't think that's, at least based on conversations I've had with Cal and Scott and the rest of the team, that's not where our head's at. Ultimately, we know that there's a fantastic set of telemetry that's generated from all of the solutions that VMware uses. How can we start to gather and federate all of this data in a way where an organization, and specifically security operations teams and CISOs, can better understand normal in their environment and then better understand malicious, like how much faster, how much sooner to that point of click can we start to push these solutions as we're blending this data together. And so, current engineering efforts are along that path. We refer to that as our open XDR strategy. We fundamentally believe, after talking to our customers, after talking to analysts, that it makes no sense to have a closed XDR solution. You're going to see a bunch of the competition go after that. I personally don't like that. Why don't I like it? We're missing pieces today from a detection and response perspective. One of the key pieces is identity. So we need partners in this space. We need folks like Okta and Ping and Microsoft and all the folks that have directory services out there, because that is crucial to actually understanding whether or not something or a user activity is bad. And if we're actually going to do zero trust, it's a key fundamental piece for us, right? So I like our position in the market. I really do. I think it gives us certain advantages that our competition doesn't, because we are open. We are partnered with almost every single vendor that's out there. And it doesn't limit us to our own telemetry to be able to bring together, this open XDR strategy. And so I know for the folks in Carbon Black SBU, it's something that, since all of us have sat in the seat as a security operator and built these things, we know we've needed it, and we are so ready to bring this to market. I'm out talking to people, right now about it. It's going to be, in my humble opinion, a little bit of a game changer what we're doing.
So today we announced Alibaba. I think a closer relationship with Alibaba was in the news. VMware announced, did a press release that we've done a tighter connection with Alibaba Cloud. When we talk multi-cloud, right? Are you guys in this space as well? I know you're obviously a cloud service. I'm not even sure we do on-prem. So first, do you guys do cloud Carbon Black on-prem, or is it primarily a cloud service?
Yeah, so I'll be really clear. Carbon Black has a number of different offerings, right? So we started off in the on-prem space with solutions like application control and solutions like endpoint detection and response on-prem. Subsequent to that, a cloud was built that offers prevention, detection, and response in one agent. That agent then goes out to the cloud. We're able to do, streaming analytics over the data so that we can determine, malicious. But we're also able to query those endpoints, right? So we're actually able to ask our endpoints questions in real time to gather data, and we're also able to have those endpoints take action. Right. So whether that action is automated, whether it's an incident responder that's actually using our agent on the endpoint to do something like forensics analysis, looking at the state of the memory or whatever the case may be to gather those artifacts. Those are things that we facilitate today. So yes, we still offer on-prem. And in fact, when you look across, I think, our broad customer base, there is still a need for folks who have enclaves, as an example. As you can imagine, if you're in the United States Navy, it's very hard to cloud enable your submarines. So if you want to do, threat hunting at scale across, certain things with slow satellite links, you're going to need some on-prem, solutions to do that, right? That being said, with Carbon Black Cloud itself, the power of that is a couple of things. One, lightweight agent with multiple functionality, so you do get prevention, detection, and response. And then, of course, bringing to market, our managed detection and response offering over that. So when you look at our team, our managed detection and response team, Paul Miller, Taree Reardon, Amelia Eastwick, these are talented folks who come from the intelligence agencies that are now defending, our customers' data. And I think that's not only huge for our customers, but it's a huge value to national security overall, and those are the types of missions that we like to get up to here.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that that come to mind here, which is you talked about real-time alerts, and what is VMware doing around? And I know Howlers gets into this. Some of your the Ask the Howlers does talk in real time about what's actually happening. What are the threats? People always tell me in security, it's not what I did yesterday. It's what I got to worry about tomorrow. It's always a moving thing. How do we keep people up to date with what they need to be worrying about? And I know you do a little bit in the Hollers. If you watch them, you'll or watch your shows, you're talking about some of the threats, what's happening. The LogJ threat came up over the holiday. We did a session on that. How is VMware and Carbon Black engaging with our customer base to keep them current?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's impossible, and I don't know if it's impossible. Maybe at some point AI can scale to this in the future to really keep up on all the things, right? I think it's part of our jobs to keep up on what's actually occurring, but more importantly, to sift through the noise, because there's a lot of noise with brand new shiny objects that come out that the adversaries are doing. More importantly, what we try to do is gather the trends. So it may not actually be an update about a specific piece of malware, although it could be in the case of like the hermetic wipers and the new ones that we're seeing out of the Ukraine that are now, spreading across the globe. But more importantly, like, what are the trends? And if I have a trend, I should defensively be able to do something about that trend, right? Like, we can't just say, hey, this is a bad thing and there's nothing anybody can do about it. There's some vendors, who do that to obviously build their brand. We try to be more realist. And so what we try to do is gather this information, look at the trends, and then say the actionable advice out of this trend is to go improve what you're doing from a credential harvesting perspective, is to actually implement microsegmentation to stop this new form of lateral movement, whatever the case may be. And so I would say we're trying to act as a clearinghouse, if you will, for this information, and then really distill it down to like useful. This is useful. This is something I need to pay attention to. But more importantly, what can I go back and tell my team to do differently today? And I hope folks who attend our stuff, like, that's something that we always hold at the end of our webinars, to go like, here's tactics that you can change today, and then here's some stratagems you may need to consider, because we do believe, and one of our design principles is really around the offensive side of the house should inform defense, and the defense should be able to react to whatever the offensive teams are doing. But you can't always cry wolf. It can't always be the world's going to end, or this new attack is going to take down the power grid. Have to be very, I think, realist about it. And I think our media counterparts, and then of course our customer counterparts, I think that's why we've elevated ourselves to that trusted status. One of the reasons.
So I always ask, people when they have solutions, and this always has bitten me in the past, right? Which is size of deployments, right? How do you guys do it scaling?
Infinite. I mean, I don't want to say infinite scale, right? But we have customers who push out hundreds of thousands of endpoints, whether that's on-prem. We blew through that scale barrier. I want to say 6 months after I started, and then of course the cloud is pretty much unlimited. I won't go into the numbers or the size that's been deployed from a managed detection and response perspective. I would highly recommend you get like Paul Miller on here to talk about that. But I can say, based on those numbers, I don't see a limit to what we're doing right now. So, if you've got 100,000 endpoints, we're happy to bring them into the fold. If you got 20,000, we're happy to bring those as well.
Cool. Just always want to ask that. We've been bitten in the past, right? Where you got something, it's relatively new, it's a new company, they've been out for 6 years, whatever. You bring them into enterprise where you have hundreds of thousands of VMs running, and then you're looking at it going, I wonder if this is going to really scale.
Yeah, we had a bit of the opposite problem, actually. I would say when we started our cloud journey, it was really performance issues on the endpoint and with the sensor itself. Those have clearly at least based on all the happy customers that I've talked to over the last 6 months, we've gotten through that. But yeah, I think for us as an endpoint vendor, it's you got to pay a lot of attention to the performance of the asset, and also, as you can imagine, we've got customers who have 6 or 7 other security tools deployed on that same system. So you got to make sure you play in the sandbox well.
So I got another community question, because I think you guys deal with this. This is a different community paradigm than I think we get in IT, which is, on one hand, you want to share. Communities love to share everything. On the other hand, some of this stuff is not something you want to share, right? Because they're vulnerabilities. How do you walk that knife edge, right? When it comes to, like, dealing with, you as an evangelist, as a security specialist, where you want to talk about everything that you know, but at the same time, you don't want to talk about everything you know.
Well, and some things you can't. I mean, frankly speaking, we get involved in NDA conversations. If you look at VMware's largest customers, we were just out with all of them. Our largest customers happen to be, government agencies and the Department of Defense and
Sure.
central intelligence agencies. And so, as you can imagine, some of those conversations are not for public consumption. That being said, I think, again, from a value in what we do, we are able to do. We have these conversations at RSA, in a bar. We have these conversations in hotel suites at DEF CON, where it's folks who we know, who we our vetted network of people who are able to do this in a way that exchanges that information. And so it's not formal. And then we're able to distill that out to the community. I'll give you an example of this. And something you're starting to see the community talk about is really firmware. And then it's a piece of software. We don't treat it like it's a piece of software, and there's a whole bunch of gaps in security on it. This conversation, I can kind of remember, started off amongst a very small group of people. Some of those people were from intelligence backgrounds and the Department of Defense backgrounds, and now you see products actually dedicated to that. A few years later on the market, with some awareness. And so I think what we try to do is track the realistic threats and then elevate those as appropriate. But sometimes we abstract that from customer cases or from the incident response engagements that are going on, because as you can imagine as well, other than CrowdStrike and Mandiant, everyone else has partnered with us. So I think this is another key thing to think about. Most of the breaches that occur, it's probably one of our incident response partners that are going in there to deploy our product on-prem to actually figure out what happened when all of this other defensive solutions have broke down. And we get a lot of information from that, right? So we have folks on our TAL team that are dedicated to managing those efforts. And then, of course, we speak with them all the time. We get those folks together in a room, exchange some of this data. So as you're looking at some brand new technique that oil rigs doing, we happen to be in the room where that's being discussed. And then we, of course, want to make sure that our product, prevents or detects that as well.
I want to change topics a little bit and talk about people on-prem, which now I'm just asking you my favorite interesting questions, which isn't necessarily software related, but it is like, how much of what we see in attacks, because like I know we get online attacks and people are getting in and there's a lot of work and we have vulnerabilities, log.j bugs, Java bugs, whatever, that let people in and they're attacking us. But then how many of the serious ones have you seen in your career? And this is just up-leveling fun questions about your career, like think of it like that, were people that somebody got into an organization and then just got access to servers and then created havoc or stole everything, right? Like, how much of that do you ever see any instances where like you hear about spies from different countries coming in and just getting access? And is anybody talking about what to do around people verifying people, security procedures in-house? You talked about keeping your asset list together. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, identity and access management and privileged access management is not easy. Helen Patton just published a pretty good article on Medium and LinkedIn and Twitter, where she was kind of really, I think, poking at the fundamentals there, which was great. I love Helen. And so look, it's an active conversation. I would tell you, we have Howlers that cover insider threats specifically. Dave Balker, if you go look him up, he's done talks at most of the B-sides, a lot of the hacker events, and his career has really been around, finding those folks, right? So I think, look, my general wisdom and guidance on that is, if you can catch an insider, you will be dang sure you're going to catch these attackers. Because why? When an external attacker gets into your environment, in almost every case, one of the first things they're going to do is elevate credentials. They're going to credential harvest, and they're going to start to impersonate people in your environment. Preferably, they want that system admin account, and preferably the global admin account. So then they're going to start to do things like it'll look like system administrator behavior, like PowerShell suddenly initiated from some system admin account on an endpoint. It's doing a process listing. Well, look, if I'm a system
No big deal.
administrator,
Yep. I do that.
I might
Yep.
have to do that for the trouble ticket that was put in because the user says their laptop's slow, right? What's going on? What's the conflict? Also, an attacker is keenly interested from a recon perspective. If I can build my defenses to see that chain of events and start to put together, that malicious behavior, I can actually stop the external attackers when they get in as well. And so we talk a lot about this. And really what we talk about is it's an analytics problem and it's a visibility problem. So identity and logging those identities is going to be key. You're going to need some endpoint data and some network data. Start to backhaul that into a SIM or your own data lake, or use someone like us to actually write the the ML that actually shows you the malicious behavior over this set of events. This is a piece of advice that TK and I have been given every single banking institution that we talk to. Go grab your fraud team and your security team and have them get together and start looking at writing analytics over these longer, slower chains where people are inside of this environment doing this behavior, because they're really low and slow attacks. And then, of course, this issue was brought to a head during the pandemic with organizations who had either had to provision too much access because we had to punch a bunch of holes, we sent a bunch of people home, or employees who weren't actually happy with what their organizations were doing from a people management perspective, and then either selling data, burning systems on the way out the door as a system administrator to punitively punish the organization. But the risks are extremely high when a trusted insider has access. It's what it is. I would also tell you, if anybody's interested, our national security strategist, Eric O'Neill, he's super famous because he worked for the FBI and caught the longest standing spy in US history. You can watch the movie about a breach, but why do I reference it in reference to insiders? He actually wrote a book, published it, I think, a year and a half ago. It's called Gray Day. Definitely read that book. It's a great read, and reach out to Eric because he's on the team as well.
All right. What are, I hate to ask this because there's always more challenges, but like, as you've seen Carbon Black come into VMware, right? And you're dealing with a much bigger footprint now. What do you see some of the challenges over the next few years? Like where do you see security happening? I want to say that, hey, we have Carbon Black, things are getting better. We're getting software, it's embedded in, but then people say it's a moving target. You have ransom attacks, you have insider, storage going down, backups going down. Where do you see, what are the biggest challenges you see for our industry going over the next several years? Why don't you take a moment to, and then I always say, what inspires you guys? But let's just say, where do you think it's going? What do you think the biggest challenges are? Where do you think the biggest movement's going to be in solving some of this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I skate far enough on the horizon line, I mean, the answer is, offensive AI and defensive AI actually battling it out right now. It's in the very rudimentary phases. You can clearly see on the attacker side that they're starting to build models to do offensive security and sort of the pre-recon part of attacks, and so you can kind of see over time where this is all going. Ultimately, I think. Look, it's really cool VMware's position in the security space, and I have all kinds of thoughts about this. But fundamentally, and I think most of us in security operate on the belief that we've had to do a bunch of things and deploy a whole bunch of technology to cover up some fundamental problems. And I'll point to something like Microsoft, and I will credit them over the last 10 years. They've done a whole lot to thin out that attack surface. From an endpoint perspective. That being said, still gaps in the game. You still see Mimikatz, jacking up Active Directory on a regular basis and selling credentials. So it's like, hey, we've got to get a little better there. But VMware, it's interesting. We sit outside of all of that. We sit below the operating system. How far can I push my detections down into the hypervisor? That is super intriguing to us, I think, in the business unit. Can I see attacks before they even get to the OS? The answer to that is yes. Now, how do we deploy that technology to make sense of it, right? So saying to an organization, we're actually giving you an infrastructure that can defend itself. This is a really, really cool premise, and I think speaks to what some of our larger customers talk about out there, especially when you look at the missions that they're on. Their missions may be a warfighting mission, maybe it's an intelligence gathering mission, but they really look at this ability as a strategic advantage, over their competition, right? And so I think if you think a little more strategically about the issues that present themselves, the number of pixie dust items we have to sprinkle on top of fundamental problems, VMware actually has the ability to change the game on the fundamental problems, to deliver something like a secure operating system with memory deception built into it, with credential deception. I mean, those are all things that from who we are and what we do become very intriguing, right? And that's what keeps me fired up about being here, frankly speaking.
Yeah, it is interesting. There's nothing nothing good that comes out of the war in Ukraine. But if you look at the way the battles have changed, right, the technology and drones and AI, it has made tanks and artillery and much of the things you considered the way to battle each other completely obsolete, because all of a sudden you have AI drones flying around automatically looking for things, and you have disinformation, you have cyber warfare happening at the same time. The whole shift, because of technology. And I can see that AI in the security battle could get just super interesting, right? Like, and not interesting in a good way, but just on both sides of the house, it could become just an AI war as this moves forward.
Yeah, and I think you highlighted something which I do like to remind people of. What's happening with Russia and Ukraine, at least from a warfare perspective, is modern warfare, and I want to reiterate that the war started long before the first, tanks went down range. The electronic warfare, the actual, they were targeting individual Ukrainian soldiers with propaganda and misinformation to try to get them to, overthrow their lieutenants, or actually frag their lieutenants, right? And then you look at the disruption of critical infrastructure pieces and communications and all of those things. It is modern warfare, and frankly speaking, if you think tanks are going to win you the next war, you're probably investing in the wrong tool.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So it is interesting in that, from that respect. What do you think the community can do for you guys? I mean, you have the hollers, you have 25 hollers that are out there. What do you think the IT community? We have 2,500 experts that, give or take, listen to this podcast. What can you think that the average IT administrator and practitioner do to help your cause?
Yeah, I think a couple of different things. One, I would say reach out, be engaged in the conversations. We're very active on any of the social platforms. LinkedIn, you can find us at InfoSecRick on Twitter. You can engage, but your voice matters, and it matters a lot. And if you look at, a lot of my friends, they're IT folks. Of course I have friends in InfoSec, but I love my IT people. And so I've never understood for the longest time why we don't like each other. Like even our latest report, if you go look at the last one I spoke to at RSA, 76% of respondents said they have a negative relationship between IT and security. And frankly speaking, after being in this industry this long, it is that's just so who's going to change it? Is it going to be the C-level? No. You know who can change it? We can change it as a community. So what do we need?
Yeah. Right.
We need participation. We need, and in fact, what I used to do is we would give out like risk mitigation awards. So if someone brought us a risk and then went and fixed that risk, we would reward them by sending them to security conferences. I would love to see more CISOs do this. Like, I want IT admins at DEF CON. I want them at Black Hat. Why? We speak a certain language. They're speaking a different language. We need to be in the same room. This is not a security problem. It is not an IT problem. It is a business problem, and the two groups at the forefront of fixing this are completely detached and not talking to each other. That's crazy,
Yeah.
right? So I think as leaders,
Right.
we need to recognize that. As CIOs, your best friend should be your CISO right now, if you have one, right? And then you should have a clearly articulated strategy. But for me, I think far too often we're in these echo chambers where I say something on LinkedIn, I know my community, maybe IT misses that, right? Or maybe IT's like, actually, Rick, I think you are completely off base. I don't think this helps me when it comes to vulnerability remediation. Here's something we're doing that actually works for us. Also, I would like that wisdom so that I can include it in the toolkit that I try to impart.
that's actually really a good insight, which is we've had this over the years. When we started just doing compute virtualization, the network admins were these people that we didn't like each other, right? The compute always had to make requests of stuff. Network took forever. It took a month for them to get back and open up supports, do whatever. So there was this disconnect between the network admin and the compute admin, right? And over the course of my time here at VMware, after like 5 or 6 years of that, it all came together because the technology brought it together. Network and compute, there wasn't really no difference. It was all one big fabric now, right? Storage was the same thing. Storage admins were these people that, oh, you had to go request storage and that. And I think now what you're saying, and this makes a lot of sense, is that, or at least I see this happening, which is the reason Carbon Black is here is because it's becoming a fundamental piece that has to be done for the SDDC or the cloud or the multi-cloud, right? And then as IT practitioners, we have to just learn this stuff. And as the minute you have to learn it, they're no longer bad guys. They're your friends because they can help you learn what you need. And all of a sudden you're all working together because security has become just like storage and networking. It is becoming a fabric that you have to worry about. And therefore, reach out to your local security team, guys that get to know each other, right, and learn.
And you can make a bit more money because I've been on this journey. I've helped train a whole lot of admins to start doing security work. The value that they have to their next organization or that organization is innumerable. I mean, look, managing BitLocker, just as a brief example, right? That's going to fall to some IT admin or some help desk admin to do. That's a crucial, you mentioned encryption, crucial. Like, we're encrypting our data. Great. You're already doing this. There's tons of folks we work with that are the antivirus administrators. And it's probably not sitting in security. It's probably going to, a junior admin that's out there. That is a wealth of experience. I mean, you're sitting in the midst of users clicking on things all of the time, right? And so I do look at it like, personally, if I'm an IT administrator, I think it gives me diversification over one of my peers. I think I can garner a little bit better money. And then to your point, I think I'm not going to get left behind, Eric. And I've seen this journey. I mean, look, I very early in my career, was going down the road of becoming E10K certified with Solaris. I mean, I spent an inordinate amount of time at their headquarters. And then in the midst of that journey, it went away. Right. Like we just stopped doing it, right? Red Hat became a thing. Virtualization became a thing. And so we had to move away from these huge, risk-based systems. Great. If I didn't pivot and then use those skills towards security, I'm going to get left behind. And so for my IT brethren and sisters, I just go like, this is the future. Cloud security is going to be part of how you deliver all of your modern apps, all of the future solutions. So learn it now, get those skills, and we're here to help. Like I'm happy to engage in those conversations.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I would say that VMware, somebody last week from my show where I was gushing about VMware Explorer went, yeah, go listen to the podcast because all they do is gush over the Explorer name. Like, and to some degree I gush a little bit, but coming from Sun and coming from IBM in my career over the years, I see VMware doing a really good job staying current, buying Carbon Black, bringing them in so that all of us as IT practitioners can ride that next wave, right? That we have experts like yourself, Rick, to be able to learn this stuff. And that makes our career and our investment, stay current. Right. So
it's one of the things I've appreciated. And again, I bought a lot of VMware product, prior to, all of those things that I've appreciated out of the community itself is, yes, the training is on point. Yes, the training matters. Yes, people get hired based on that training. They get promoted based on that training. And if we can make that sticky. And then finally, the last thing I'll tell you, our big why. Just imagine for a second, if we can empower the hundreds of thousands of people that are trained on our platforms to drive better security outcomes. That is why we're here, right? Like we want to unlock the power of these really smart people to just be a little smarter in a certain area and take some better actions. Now I think we're getting to a place where we're actually creating a world safe from cyber attack.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Last but not least, we are on youtube.com/VBarbecue. And because it is lunchtime in California, we do the podcast every Wednesday, 12 to 1 at lunchtime. You can come watch us live if you want. We'll talk VBarbecue. So we have Tony Foster on the line. I think he did some barbecue a weekend or two ago. So we'll loop over to Tony Foster. Before I get to Tony, Rick, I'll ask you, any favorite barbecue you like down there in San Diego?
So this is like a super great, like people will fight to the death over this. Here's what I'll say: pulled pork, North Carolina barbecue, and that sauce, and then Texas brisket. I don't know that it gets much better. Finding a place in San Diego that blends both of those together well is a little tough. Although we do have Phil's Barbecue, which is pretty well. It's a little more Kansas City based. But for me, if I can get a fantastic pulled pork, Carolina pulled pork sandwich with that red vinegar sauce or a Texas brisket, I'm all in.
All right. Well, there you go. That's it from Rick. Tony Foster, are you around? And can you hear me? And do you have anything to talk barbecue?
I am. Yes, I do. So here last week I did pork chops. I know it sounds standard, but it was good. It's the first pork chops of the season. Got them on the grill, and they were good.
Now, I think you use a honey glaze or something like that. Like you've told us your pork chop recipe in the past.
So this time I just lightly seasoned them with a little bit of Tony Sachery seasoning and put them on. Most of the time I do a glaze on them, and the glaze will vary, but a lot of times it is a honey glaze.
Nice. I do have one barbecue to send us off. We did something unique. We got a couple of these portable barbecue pans, and you can get a Korean half little round hat that goes on top of these little barbecue. They use propane gas or these little canister gases. And you slice steak into really thin pieces, and it's like Korean barbecue. You can get Korean barbecue sauce and marinate your barbecue. So what you would go spend a couple $100 with in your barbecue, you can do that in your backyard on these cute little barbecue things that you can get off Amazon, cute little propane ones. But the thing that we did was we went to a barbecue place, ordered some vegetables, and we always barbecue our vegetables, on the grill on these little things. They made a tinfoil boat, right? They put asparagus and broccoli in it, right? Then they put some oil in it. Then they put garlic butter in that, wrapped it up. And then they put that on the grill while you're grilling all your Korean barbecue things. And after about 10 minutes, you open that up and you got like steamed garlic, vegetables. Oh man, let me tell you, that was something new that I hadn't seen before, which you can wrap your vegetables in tin foil and do it on your Weber or whatever, but never thought that's how to do it in a Korean barbecue area. So cool stuff. With that, Rick, thanks for being on the show at InfoSec Rick. Go give him a follow. And thanks for being here and talking a little bit about security. Go watch the Howlers, give him a follow. And if you're really into security, I know that Corey Romero has a VExperts subgroup that is Carbon Black. You can apply to be part of that or go follow them. And maybe one day you'll be a Howler too. So, Rick, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.